Hey everybody, it's Jackson Fulcher here, and today I'm doing a lumped together movie review. I've got 3 movies that I've seen over the past couple of weeks. They're horror movies, so themes. And I'm going to be talking about them in a catch-up segment because I've seen a couple movies. I don't want to fall too behind on them, but because of my schedule that tends to happen, so I decided, let's lump them together. 2 of them I thought was appropriate because I wouldn't have heard about them unless a bigger YouTuber, Chris Stuckman, hadn't covered them already and gauged my interest. And then the other one is just something else that not a lot of people have probably heard of, so this is the horror movie catch-up review video that you might or might not have heard of, but are definitely more independent than mainstream. Cool! Because I feel like it's always good to expand your movie horizons. I know some people will just say, well, that movie's not on my radar, so I'm not even going to think about it. But it's like, I like the idea of just expanding your film knowledge or your viewing history by watching movies and exposing yourselves to talent, whether it be behind the camera or in front of it, that you might not even hear about ever. So without further ado, let's dive on into the first of 3 movies. This one is called The Vigil. This movie is interesting because it exposed me to something that I never knew existed, which is apparently in the Orthodox Jewish faith, if someone dies, a member of that family who is also Jewish will watch over the body for a whole night before it's taken away to the morgue to make sure that nothing bad happens to it. And if there's no immediate family there, or if the person that is there that's in the family isn't of the right state of mind, then someone in the Jewish faith will be hired to watch over the body for a whole night. And I never knew about that. It seems like something that maybe would have been made into a horror movie already by this point, but hasn't for some reason. Or maybe there has been, but that's a little more out of the radar for many people, myself included. But I really did enjoy that concept going in, taking that idea and then making it into a horror movie, but not just like a bump in the night, dead bodies rising up and haunted and shit, haunting this one dude, but one that's really personal too. This movie has a story. It has a theme. We have this main character played by the actor Dave Davis, who I think is incredible in this. So far, in the 4 months of 2021, he has given one of my favorite performances so far. A man who is he's got a complicated relationship with his Jewish faith. He's not as devout as he once was. The movie opens with a group therapy sesh where other people are kind of talking about how they're leading different lives now than when they were more devout in their faith. And this man is collected to participate in this religious practice almost immediately after that. So he's going in just thinking this will be a good paycheck for me. It's going to pay well, and then I can just move on. And he's having these complicated thoughts, and over the course of the night, the horrors in the house are propelling him to overcome this thing that is haunting him from his past that led to these complications in his faith. And all the while doing that, eventually getting to a point where they tie in the dead body's actual history into it too, and they have a nice parallel. It was actually very good storytelling. It was storytelling I wasn't really expecting from guy watches over a dead body for a night movie. I was literally just expecting bumps in the night, house is haunted, and all that, but instead they offered something a little more thoughtful and even kind of emotional too. This actor, I'm telling you, offers something really great here, and he's got a lot of great emotional moments to work off of. The script is great. He's got great material to work off of too. This movie was distributed by IFC Films. They previously did The Babadook, and I'm not saying this movie is as great as The Babadook, but as far as those movies are really more so personal. They've got great filmmaking to back up their scares, but they're also stories that have lessons. They have themes that they want to convey to the audience. And so when I saw the IFC logo pop up in the beginning, I was like, oh, this is probably going to be great. And I was right. The only issue I think I have with the movie is that maybe they could have spent a little bit more time in the beginning just showing off what's a day in the life for this guy, kind of now that he has left, because they just showed the group therapy session and then they quickly move on to, well, I guess I'm being hired to do this thing. And I think we could have used just a little bit more time just showing maybe he's having trouble adapting to a regular life and not doing anything tied to religion or his faith. But overall, I found this movie really impactful. There's this girl that he meets in group therapy, and how they kind of work that into horror later on, I thought was really clever and really good. They even have a good excuse for him to not leave the property. There's at one point where he runs out, and I'm like, okay, this can't be that simple, because obviously why was he here the whole time? And without spoiling anything, they give a good reason for him to go back to the house, and it's okay, good. They thought about everything, and they also got the most out of their horror sequences in the house. house. It helps that it's paced really well. Like in the beginning, you can just excuse like, oh, this guy mentioned he's on some medication, so maybe he thinks he's just seeing some hallucination, so it keeps him in the house a little longer. And then once it does get to that point where he wants to leave, they give that compelling reason, and you're like, okay, it's paced really well. There's great horror sequences in this, a lot of great stuff. There's one involving like a close-up of like a toenail or a fingernail. I think it was a toenail, and it was like, oh god, it was gross. The cinematography is great, the lighting too, like the use of their shadows are excellent, the musical score is great, but the thing that really does make this movie stand out is its story. The final like scare sequence of the film is completely kind of personal. While these extreme supernatural elements are going on, your attention is really on this character closing out his arc. He's getting to that point, and that's what's really impressive about this movie. There's a woman named Lynn Cohen in this who plays the wife of the dead body, but she's not of the right state of mind anymore, and she kind of pops up to offer up some exposition every once in a while, but she's really good at it. She's a really great actress, and it helps that she's like an actual character. It's not just I'm randomly showing up to give you exposition, or you're visiting me specifically just for exposition. Like, no, she's tied to this person that he's watching, so it makes sense, and she's really good. They have good back and forth, those two, every once in a while. I also thought they ended this really well. It's not an abrupt ending where they leave certain things hanging and you're like, I wish there was more that I could maybe piece together, but it feels like you just ended it. It's one of those where you're like, yeah, everything's pretty much kind of wrapped up, but it leaves you with this feeling of anything could happen, and that's okay, you know, without spoiling too much. And I thought that was really great. I thought they handled this movie really well. Keith Thomas is the writer and director, and I would love to see more horror movies from him, because this is a hour, 20, 30-minute movie about a guy in a house, and they paced it excellently. Every scare worked, and I was honestly on edge, not just because there's scare stuff happening, but because I cared about this character. So I would love to see this guy continue in other horror movies. I'd give this an A, honestly. It's really great. I would highly recommend checking this out. Jakobs Wife is coming to Shudder soon, but I had to pay for it on Amazon Prime for like early access. And I really enjoyed this movie too. I think as far as like the Vigil in this, I prefer the Vigil because this one, it has a couple more things that I would say like, well, that's kind of typical of like a B kind of horror movie. Like there's certain ways they edit like a visual effect shot involving rats, and like a sound effect they use when someone winks, and it's that literal like ding noise. I was like, it's a little... maybe not for this one. There's a couple like false jumps that they do where I was like, I don't know why movies continue to do false jumps when they're probably not as good as they think they are. And I guess similarly to the Vigil, they could have used a little bit more time also to kind of flesh out this small town and the interactions between Barbara Crampton and Larry Fessenden in this town, their roles in it. But overall, I really enjoyed this movie because also similarly to the Vigil, it's kind of about something. It's about this older couple whose relationship isn't the same. You know, the spark is completely kind of dead. It's not like slowly dying, it's kind of already dead. Larry Fessenden plays like this minister, and he only really cares about himself. Not that he hates his wife or like he actively like abuses her intentionally. He's just very not present. He's very absent-minded to the way that his wife feels and the way he's kind of treating her by talking over her and not taking her thoughts into consideration for anything. And Barbara Crampton plays a woman who, after getting bit by a vampire, she starts to act differently and a little more wild, but she kind of likes that too. And the movie does a great job of having these two, not just like she gets bit by a vampire and the movie is like, I'm eating my husband and then I'm doing other stuff. It's a movie about potentially repairing this relationship, characters talking through their issues and finally coming to terms with a better relationship and being better people to each other. And I thought that was really great. These two actors are great. Barbara Crampton is wild in this. She's having a blast, obviously, and it's a blast to watch her. And Larry Fessenden, he pulls off a lot of comedy really well in this movie. He's really great. It makes him more likable when a lot of times when you watch a movie like this, you'd be like, oh, I don't like this guy. But in this, it's like, he's not intentionally doing anything wrong, and he's a goof. So I was able to enjoy him a lot. The woman who plays the nun in like The Conjuring 2, she's in this as like some Nosferatu design looking thing, and she's really good in this. Like there's good practical effects, like not just with that, but also like ripping off of heads and blood squirts, and it gets really messy, and it's so much fun to watch. Naisha Bell plays another one of the vampires, and a lot of times when she's saying her dialogue, it's a blast to kind of watch. I thought she she was really excellent in this as a supporting role, but as like this vamped out looking thing. She's really great. For a low budget movie that sometimes suffers from a restrained budget, they do manage to pull off some really effective scenes, some really fun and kind of intense sequences, and I thought this movie was kind of a blast from start to finish. I also really enjoyed the ending of this movie. Similarly to The Vigil, it's not abrupt. It doesn't leave anything hanging where you're like, oh, I wanted to know what happened next, and it seemed like you guys didn't have anything. Crap. It's one of those where they end it like, hey, either one of these things we're presenting to you could happen, and you can kind of picture what would happen next if either comes to fruition. The point isn't really those, though. You know, it's not really necessarily finding these out. The point is really more so that these characters are coming to terms with their relationship, and either is about to make a decision here. And whichever decision you prefer, that's it. I thought it worked best for the theme of the movie, for how the movie was written overall. I had a really fun time with Jakobs Wife. I prefer The Vigil as far as like a really effective and kind of emotional horror movie at points, but I think Jakobs Wife is a blast kind of from start to finish. I thought they did a really great job with that movie. I know the director did a previous movie that some people are kind of mixed on. I would say if you maybe thought that movie was mixed, you might maybe enjoy this one a bit more, because I was genuinely engaged with the storytelling and the characters. Once again, Larry Fessenden and Barbara Crampton are great in this. Alright, so we had two independent horror movies that were pretty great all around. That's fun, that's neat, that's really cool. You know, this catch-up review is going pretty well. I hope that the third movie is about as good as those two and not something that's like completely opposite end of the spectrum as far as quality goes. Our next movie is In the Earth. In the Earth was written and directed by Ben Wheatley. I believe he said that he wrote this movie like near the beginning of COVID lockdowns and stuff like that, or like maybe a month into it. Either way, it was written and directed during the COVID lockdown. So like end of last year, which is pretty amazing that you can put a production together like that and film a movie. Obviously, we've had a couple made in COVID movies by now, like Lockdown with Anne Hathaway and Chiwetel Ejiofor, and Malcolm and Marie with Zendaya and John David Washington, and several coming out soon, either filmed during COVID or movies about COVID. We're just never gonna see the end of it. But still, you made a movie during COVID lockdowns when a lot of people thought that that might not be possible until afterwards. That's really impressive. It's really cool. It's also impressive when you think about a lot of the horror sequences in this. I think Ben Wheatley does a pretty good job with a lot of the horror in this. Like there's involving a foot again. There's something involving a foot that goes on, and at times it's like, oh God, I can't watch this anymore. It's too gross. And it almost like borders into like dark comedy at one point involving it. And it was like, if you were like of a more darker sense of humor, you might actually find this kind of funny. It almost seems like the actors are thinking that too. But speaking of the actors, they also do a pretty good job in this. They do the best with what they're given, but if I'm gonna be honest, I was not particularly a big fan of this movie at the end of it. I really wanted to, because I have not seen Ben Wheatley's earlier films, but Free Fire I thought was, you know, okay. I could have used a better movie out of that, and his Rebecca remake, I was like, no, I prefer Hitchcock's. You know, if you're gonna remake Hitchcock, you're probably not gonna be as good. I'm just gonna let you know right off the bat. But a lot of people were saying, like when this premiered at a festival a couple months ago, like this is a return to form for Ben Wheatley back in his original horror days. And I was like, okay, I would like to see Ben Wheatley making a good movie, a good horror movie, no doubt. And unfortunately, I didn't feel it. It definitely feels like just horror schlock, like people lost in the woods and something's happening to them. But they definitely tried to elevate it by making the screenwriting a little more like nose in the air. I don't want to say pretentious, but it definitely felt like they thought this premise was a little more grandiose than maybe they thought, because by the time the movie ended, it also ends pretty abruptly, similar to the other two movies, but in this case it was one of those like, what kind of moments where I was like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to get out of this other than that thing happened, and that's I don't know if that's good or bad, if I'm being honest. I have no idea. The movie is pretty dry. They have like, the characters are going into the woods to find someone to help them bring up a cure to end this disease that's running rampant. It's not COVID, but it's COVID, pretty much. Like, they mention everything but saying the name of COVID, even though they're still like, oh no, it could be anything. Like, just say it's COVID, damn it. But other than like vague references to social distancing and like sanitizing people, you know, the world itself is pretty contained to just these characters in the woods. Like, all right, we're gonna go into the woods, see you around, you know, and the characters themselves feel pretty limited. Like, one's a park ranger, that's it. The other one has a history with this person they're looking for that's in the woods, and they never go as far with that as I would have liked. It seemed like it was going to be something. Like, this character's like, we used to have a history, we were in correspondence with each other, but, you know, kind of fell off. And then when they finally reunite, not really a spoiler, when they finally reunite, it's kind of like, I don't feel like you guys have had a history together at all, but you were saying you did. You know, there's nothing here, you know, and the performers, I don't want to fault them because they really are, like, putting their all into this, but it's just the material is weak. You know, there isn't anything for them to work off of at a certain point. They had a setup, a pretty basic setup, but a setup that led them to this. And it's like, okay, this horror stuff with this guy named Zach in this tent it's really kind of chilling and kind of disgusting to watch. But once that kind of series of events kind of passes and they move on, and it's like, okay, I'm starting to lose interest in the movie again. You kind of had me, and then you lost me. And everything else just wasn't as good at that point. It gets to a point where there's a lot of disorienting filmmaking, which I want to give props to Ben Wheatley for actually doing. Like, yeah, it's disorienting, but here's what it is. It's the main guy walks into a field, and to distract Zach, this person that's disturbing them, sorry, they pull up a lot of flashing lights, like a ton of flashing lights in this field. This will distract him, just navigate through, but it's so in your face, like the camera is with this guy, and it's just lights flashing all over the screen. Like, I'm not someone who's epileptic who, like, sees flashes and, like, starts to have a seizure or anything. I can usually, like, for a short period of time in a movie, watch it, but in this case, it was just so much for, like, a solid 5, maybe 10 minutes, something like that. It was a long sequence, and I was like, dude, I can't watch it. I gotta look away. And that's what I did. I was in the theater and I was looking away. I could not look directly at the screen. It wasn't even something where I was like, ooh, I was temporarily like unfocused, but now I'm back into it. It's like, just, oh, turn it off. Please stop. And then they do it again later on near the end of the movie. And it's like, there's a couple moments where they put in like some flashy editing, like, you know, just a lot of like quick shots of things. And I'm like, that's not particularly bad, but it's this stuff where it's like, it's too disorienting. I literally can't keep my eyes on it. Like the body horror stuff in this movie, like it's hard to watch just because it's body horror and it's effectively pulled off, not because it's flashing lights in your face that are literally preventing you from watching it. Like the body horror stuff, that's just like a natural, like, ooh, with the lights flashing, it's like you're literally trying to make me not look. Okay, I guess I won't. This movie also, like, abruptly will cut to black at certain parts and then just cut back, and it's like a couple minutes or like maybe an hour later, and it's like, I don't know why it's edited like this. I also don't know why they switched to like iPhone cameras every once in a while, and I don't know why this is a thing, but I noticed it. At first I was like, is that what I think it is? And then as the movie went on, I was like, okay, they're probably not doing that again, but then they did it again. Like, there's another shot. Oh, look, another shot where they're doing an iPhone quality. I can tell because you've been shooting with a movie camera for the entire time, and now all of a sudden, like, the frame rate, it changes, like the quality itself, like there's something different about it. This is a phone. I'm looking at a phone right now. And I have no idea why they did that. Honestly, I'm sitting here and I'm trying to puzzle it out right now, and I'm like, I have no idea why any sensible filmmaker would do that, because I don't think it takes a genius to figure out, like, hey, the picture quality in these two cameras, movie camera, iPhone camera, it doesn't match. So why is there random moments where shots are just iPhone? Why couldn't you, what was wrong with the movie camera at that point? What, did you need another take on that, but you thought, I don't want to reshoot it or anything. Use the iPhone one that we did. For some reason we were shooting with an iPhone for like backup. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know why they did. It's baffling. It's not even like the worst part about the movie, but it baffled me to no end. I like to think that I'm somebody who likes to look a little deeper as far as like what movies go for with their themes, their messages, and if it's a horror movie especially and they're trying to be a little more metaphorical or a little more thoughtful, I like that. Obviously, I just talked about The Vigil, but in this case, it just felt like the filmmaking was trying to convey that sense of like importance and like this means something. But watching the movie and really analyzing the story, it's like I don't don't know what I was supposed to get out of this, other than, like, the body horror stuff is freaky, like, the Zach character is kind of freaky in itself, and the acting's not bad, but the characters are all weak. Like, the script writing, you can tell, it feels like a first draft. You can tell it was written in the span of, like, 2 weeks during COVID lockdown. You know, I hate to say that because I know you gave people jobs, which is great, especially during COVID, but in this case, it's like, couldn't you have, like, spent, like, maybe another week writing, like, a different draft or punching some things up? Because, goddamn, like, did you have to get it out, like, several months after you filmed it? Like, because that's the thing, too, is, like, they filmed it in a short period of time, and now it's out. Like, I believe it wrapped production, like, 5 months ago, like, in December or something like that, and now it's out. And, like, I have no idea why it was so rushed together, but oh well, we have a Ben Wheatley return to his roots movie, which must mean his other movies aren't that good, I guess. I don't know. Maybe, I'm sure they are. You know, I've heard great things about High Rise and Sightseers and his other movies, but for people saying this is like a return to form, I feel like they're just saying that because of Rebecca and Free Fire were just completely different than obviously this one, which, I mean, yeah, I guess it is literally a return to form as far as, like, the genre. As far as, like, the actual movie quality, maybe not, I guess. I don't know. I did not care for this movie, and I would definitely not recommend seeing it in a theater because the flashing lights on that big screen, Jesus Christ. You know what? It occurs to me as I was thinking, like, should I grade In the Earth? I forgot to grade Jakobs Wife. Jakobs Wife gets a B+, and this gets a C. I can't hate it because there are things that I do admire about it. It's just a lot of the negatives unfortunately outweighed the positives, and I can't say I enjoyed this even as a fan of, like, horror movies or deeper horror movies. It's just kind of I got nothing out of it, and I have no desire to revisit it to analyze its thought-provoking plot, because thought-provoking? No. I'm sorry. Anyways, that's my catch-up reviews for these 3 horror movies. If you've seen any of them, leave in the comments below what you thought of them, or if you haven't, I hope you check them out soon because I think at least 2 of them are worth your time. And In the Earth, I'm kind of in the minority as far as that opinion goes. A lot of people have been kind of enjoying it and like, praising Ben Wheatley for it, so you might enjoy that too. So why not check it out? Just don't check it out in the theater. You might die. They give a warning, like, warning, you might get epilepsy, but that wasn't enough, obviously. It was way more than I expected. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.